Hi, I'm Daniel Clement. I teach yoga trainings up here on Texada Island. This is, as you can see, part of my home studio. I've got a nice warm wood fire going. The fire's taking in oxygen and then expelling the gases back out through the chimney. And that movement is a movement of prana. We're going to talk about that in a minute. On my right here, I've got the Shiva Nataraj, who's Shiva is the destroyer or the dissolver of things, and he's destroying. He's doing his dance to destroy or dissolve the universe so that a new form of being can come into existence. And on the other side here, I've got an anatomical skeleton. So I want to use these three ideas and talk about how they work within the yogic, what we would call the subtle body, or the subjective recognition of what's going on when we practice yoga. And the model that has been used within the Indian tradition for this is called the Vayus. And a Vayu is like a wind or current. And there are 5 main Vayus within the body, within the tradition. And this is what I want to get into, is how the subjective aspects of yoga can be contrasted with the objective aspects of yoga, and how we can find our way across that bridge. So the 5 Vayus are movements of energy that move in us in an upward movement. So when you inhale, your chest would broaden, you expand, the nervous system lights up, and you become more kind of awake. So that's a movement of opening. The spine actually moves into flexion at the same time when you inhale, as the ribs expand. So that's called prana, movement of inhale, an uplifting energy. The opposite, or the complementary, would be apana, which means the downward flow of energy. So when we relax at the end of the day, or you sit down in a chair and you've had a difficult time and you want to settle, we settle down, the breath leaves us, the chest deflates, the spine moves into flexion, and the parasympathetic nervous system actually is stimulated there. So that's the rest and restore side of the nervous system. We settle down, right? When we want to go to sleep or relax, we want to have that energy of apana, of moving down, settling. If you do that, if you take an inhale and exhale and just feel how your pelvis feels when you exhale, there is actually kind of a settling down. And then when you inhale, there's almost an uprooting or a lifting up. So these energies are moving back and forth all the time with our breath. So those are 2 of the Vayus. There are 3 other ones. There's ones that pull in and back out kind of in a more concentric fashion. We'll just talk about prana and apana for now. So hold that thought for just a second. I want to come back to this idea of Shiva and also of a medicalization, I would call it, of yoga. So in the early 20th century, there was a few notable Indian teachers that really reinvented yoga at that part of the 20th century. And by reinvention, what I mean is they were aware of the mythological, and you could even say religious, underpinnings of the practice of yoga within India. But in order to popularize it and expand it, what they really did was secularize yoga. So they took a practice that was, I would say, deeply woven into Hinduism, and started to detach some of those religious or mystical aspects from the practice, and then begin to legitimize it through medicine and through research. At least those are the claims, and then using more of a Western physiological aspect. So here's an example. Within the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, it's one of the 15th century texts of the yoga tradition. There's a few poses described, but there's also a lot of cleansing techniques and techniques that are used to try to inspire a lift of consciousness or an expansion of consciousness, even enlightenment. And one of the techniques they would use would be called the Kachari Mudra, which you want to roll your tongue back in your mouth so that the tip of your tongue could touch the back of your throat, and then you would be able to receive the nectar of immortality that comes down from the crown chakra. And then it says within the Hatha Yoga Pradipika that the yogi who is able to do this cures all disease, and I believe even death. So there's some pretty extraordinary claims going on there. And one of the things they would say is, if you can't roll your tongue back, then what you want to do is every day just take a sharp leaf and just cut the frenulum, the tongue tie in your tongue, so that you eventually sever the tongue tie, and then you can roll the tongue back and it'll touch the roof of the mouth, and then you can therefore receive the nectar of immortality. So that's one example of a practice of Hatha Yoga that didn't get carried forward into modern yoga studios, because of course it's self-harm in a lot of ways, right? Like, you're actually damaging yourself if you try to do that. So the question will be, well, what's the benefit to us? So that shows you that the Western approach to yoga is seeking benefits: health, flexibility, stability of mind, perhaps decreases of anxiety. So we're looking for the benefits for our mind body. But within the Indian tradition, within the mystical tradition, it has a lot to do with transcendence, with actually getting out of the body, and the world as it is seen as kind of a veil of tears. So there's a real big difference between ancient yoga, in my mind, and the modern practices of yoga. And we can find that the Vayus actually sit right in between these two. So again, is a Vayu a real thing? Is a current of energy a real thing? Well, when you inhale, certainly you have an expansion in the chest, and when you exhale, you release all the things that I mentioned about those currents of energy that express themselves in the breath are true things. They're actually measurable. They're not spoken about within the Indian tradition. Of course, they weren't doing things like cadaver dissection. They didn't have the modern approach to medicine that we have. So all of their experiments with this stuff were more subjective in a living human being. That doesn't mean there's no value to them. It also doesn't mean that they're all true. So let's do a bit of practice. Maybe we can get into it, get away from the theory, and actually feel this. So just take a comfortable seat, sit nice and tall. You can close your eyes if you like. Turn your attention to your breath, and it doesn't have to be loud, it doesn't have to be forceful, but you can take a few moments and just inhale and exhale through the nose. And just feel the rise and fall of your chest as you do that. We want to start off with a peaceful, relaxed breath. All right, you can open your eyes so you can see me. And as you inhale, you can bring your hand up to illustrate the movement upwards of your breath. And as you exhale, you can bring your hand back down. So I'll just talk rather than try to breathe and talk at the same time. Every inhale, you just follow your breath with the hand, and as you exhale, you come back down. See if you can breathe first and let the hand move second. One more time. All right. So you're recognizing the breath, you're placing some movement of the body to help illustrate the movement of the breath. And now I'm doing it with two hands. So as I inhale, you can do this with me too. You can lift and expand the chest and open. And then as you exhale, that quality of rooting. And as a metaphor, if you think the leaves and branches of a tree open and expand in the movement of prana, and the roots of the tree drive down and ground the tree in the movement of apana. So we are expressing those two. Again, now we're into the subjective. We're just feeling, is there some correlation between the breath and placing these ideas in the mind, so that when you open and expand, you actually feel more expansive, more awake. And when you exhale, you feel more rooted, more grounded than you might if you weren't thinking about that metaphor and actually using the hands to illustrate this. All right, you can relax the hands. So here, again, we get into this bridge or this line between the ancient and the modern. So when I do this stuff, and I am a very, I would say, skeptical person in general, but when I practice yoga like this, when I use the Vayus to express the movements of prana in the way that I feel it, I actually do feel more equanimity in the mind. Now, whether or not you could say, do you really feel that, or are you just imagining it? Well, What is mental equanimity? Mental equanimity is the subjective experience of feeling more grounded or more stable. So if I report to you that I feel more grounded because of this, and I actually appear to be relaxed, that is what we're looking for. So there isn't really, as far as I know, any other way to measure equanimity other than a subjective report. So here we have the subjective blending into the objective, and I think the Vayus again are a great way of expressing that. So let's move on a little bit more. So if you've ever seen anybody do Tai Chi, you'll see that they'll sometimes do these movements, right? You'll see this sort of up and down movement, but you'll also see them doing other movements, right? So pulling in and stretching back out, and they'll often be doing two things at the same time. One hand will be expressing a movement in, while the other hand expresses a movement out, or one hand will be lifting up while the other one's coming down. So if this is the movement of prana, lifting up, this could be the movement of apana, going down. So if I wanted to maintain a mental and physical equanimity or balance between these two Vayus, these two movements of energy, then as I inhale and lift up, I also want to be feeling the grounding force of apana. And when I exhale, rather than just collapsing, I want to maintain bright upper body so that I have a balance of rooting and expansion all the time. We're just doing it with the hands now. You could also be doing this with sun salutations or any other fluid pose. But you can try this. So with your right hand, just inhale, lift. And exhale, you can bring the hand back down. Do that again, just one side of the prana. Prana lifting and prana descending, or apana. Now you can add the other hand. As you inhale, bring the left hand down to illustrate the rooting. And as you exhale, bring the left hand up to remind you to stay bright in the chest. Inhaling and staying rooted. Exhaling and maintaining an expansive chest. A couple more times. And then you can just bring your hands down, rest them on your lap, keep your eyes closed, keep your attention on your breath. And now, without using the hands to illustrate, just see if you can maintain this quality of rootedness as you inhale. And maintain a quality of alertness and openness as you exhale. Again. And then take a few breaths and just allow the breath to become more and more quiet. And so the movements of prana that you're feeling, if you are feeling them, are more subtle. But your attention is becoming sharper. So you can notice them. And then just let any control of the breath go. And it's almost as if you're listening for the sound of the breath or the residue of that practice. Is there a place somewhere in the body where you feel the energy kind of floating or existing? And then you can open the eyes. So of course everyone feels different things. Our ability to be interoceptive, to feel what's going on inside the body, varies from person to person. And of course the question is, am I imagining it? or is it real? And I would again just go back to the value, the utility of this practice rather than worrying too much about that. So those are the Vayus. Those are at least the two movements of prana and apana. And I was going to do a video that would include movement as well and doing sun salutations and expressing it more actively. But I think that the theory probably requires its own work to begin with to understand it, and then maybe at a later video I can put that in to the physical practice of hatha yoga. But if you practice, or you see somebody practicing yoga or tai chi and you see this fluidity of movement and what seems to be kind of an internal grace, to my mind that's an expression of the Vayus, of finding the place in the middle between these polar opposites. So thanks for listening.